Hi, everybody. My name's Paul Hill from the 1020 Networking Group. And the podcast today, I'm joined by Jane Johnson of Homes of Hampshire and by Desi Cole of First Choice Finance South. We're going to be talking about all things property and mortgage related. So I'm going to hand it over to one of you ladies. Desi, off you go.
Well, we had a bit of a chat, didn't we, Jane? And we were trying to decide what we think that you might want to listen to and hear about from both of us today. So we thought we'd start off by looking at the main areas of first-time buyers and wanting to buy a property. So what sort of things would someone who wants to buy a property come to you with, Jane?
Well, they come to us obviously to see if we've got the house they want, but they also come quite often to find out what they have to do to buy their first house. So I would say your first port of call always is speak to a mortgage advisor first, because you need to know exactly how much money you can borrow, and to make sure you've got enough cash deposit saved before you can even start looking. And it's surprising, people don't know how much they're entitled to borrow, and sometimes they can borrow a lot more than they think they can, which you obviously know more about than me.
Yeah, so we thought we'd have a little bit of a chat about that because it's very difficult sometimes to understand where your affordability is. So we were speaking a little bit about that, and the main areas I think that you sort of find your clients want to identify is what their mortgage affordability might be, how much they can pay in terms of a monthly payment, and then the deposit side of things as well. So there's different areas that we tend to help clients with. Mainly, we'd help the general clients who have the pay slips and they know what their salary is. And then we would look at the first time buyers who are in an unusual circumstance or home movers who might be slightly unusual circumstances as well. So that would be directors and sole traders. And we would help them around how to identify what their actual affordability is. You had an interesting story about that.
I did. I had such an enthusiastic couple come and look around a property just 2 weeks ago, in fact, barely 2 weeks ago, and they wanted it so much. And they couldn't believe they could afford it. And they kept telling me this and da. But it turns out they had been working for their same family company for years, but they were employees, so they had a salary. And literally, I don't know, a couple, 2 or 3 months ago, they'd bought the company outright. So they were now the owners, directors of it. And they just assumed their affordability on what the money there was they were taking home. They didn't take into account that now they were directors of the company. They needed to have 2 years of accounts because they'd renamed, they'd set the company up again, of trading before they could borrow any money. So having put an offer in and got really excited, they then had to say, we've made a mistake. And of course, I didn't know that. If they'd spoken to me about that before, I would have been able to point them in the right direction.
And I think that's the biggest challenge sometimes for people is knowing where it's like chicken and egg. Oh, I want to look at the house. How much can I actually buy? And also what we can help with in relation to the affordability. So sometimes coming to a mortgage advisor first will give you that benefit of knowing with that confidence that you can actually go and approach an estate agent. So let's say they have come to me and they understand that as a company director, what their options are, because those are the most challenging. And they come to you and they go, well, we do want to look at our property. What would you say is a good buyer then that you would be looking to have on your books?
Well, I mean, a good buyer is one who's obviously either ready to go, i.e., they've got all the cash, or they've got their deposit and their mortgage ready, or their house is on the market, and better still, their house is sold, or they've at least got a buyer. So that's the best place to be. I do get people who look when they haven't put the house on the market yet because they want to get a feel for what's out there before they decide to move. And to be fair, I do let them do viewings, but a lot of agents won't. A lot of estate agents are quite strict these days. You have to be sold and in a position to go before they let you view. I actually don't agree with that because I think people become proceedable quite suddenly sometimes. So I will let all of those people view, but I wouldn't go out of my way if it was a house a long way away to do a one-off viewing for them if they're not remotely in a position to buy. But if I'm there anyway with lots of viewings, I say, of course, come along, have a look. And then if they're interested, we talk about next steps and get them to hurry their game up a bit.
For me, that's what really sets you apart as an estate agent, because often I hear all the stories from my clients who've come to me who are looking for a good estate agent, and often they get turned down just because the estate agent doesn't believe they're actually in a strong position. Whereas you look at their circumstances and help them understand where they're actually at and you are willing to give them that opportunity to look at the properties as well. And I think that really makes you stand out as a great estate agent.
Well, moving house is a big thing, isn't it? It's the biggest thing you ever buy. I mean, what most people don't buy anything bigger than a house, do they? So you've got to get it right. And I think if looking at a few before you've decided helps, then you should be able to do it.
What sets you apart?
I think it's a tough question for me from a mortgage perspective. I do very much what most mortgage advisors do, is I do look at everything from where they are at the beginning all the way through to what they can actually purchase and give them the advice. I prefer to think that I am that client. Sorry, I'm getting all my words twisted now. I prefer to think that I am the person that they would come to with that trust, so that they know that I would be able to offer them. I think the scariest thing when you're going through that process is putting an offer in and not actually having that peace of mind that you know that offer is going to be in place. And for me, that's vital. So whenever I'm having that conversation with a client, I want them to know that when they buy that property, they have the certainty behind them. So yeah, I'd say I'd make sure I go that extra mile from that perspective.
Not a lot of people know, but I was a mortgage broker for 25 years. And what you're doing, in effect, is you're fulfilling one of their biggest dreams. And that's what you're doing. You're enable people to achieve something magical in their lives. That's amazing.
Does help. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really good. I enjoy that process. And obviously, I love helping clients. Jane's daughter's gone through it recently. And that whole thought process of when you begin and not knowing, and then going all the way through to actually finding that property really can make the big difference. So we mentioned about cash buyers. Do you want to tell us your little story on what an actual cash buyer is?
Well, to me, it was always obvious if you're a cash buyer, you've got the cash to buy a house outright. But it's actually amazing that most people don't understand that term. There's a larger number of people out there who think they are a cash buyer if they're a first-time buyer, just because there's no chain behind them, I guess. Because they've got the mortgage and the deposit, they go, "We're a cash buyer." They go, "You're not, you're a first-time buyer." And there's a mortgage there. So that will hold things up slightly while the mortgage company check things out. And there will be a mortgage survey required, which if you're a cash buyer, there's none of those things. A cash buyer really is that you have enough cash in the bank, which you have to prove to us, to buy the property outright with no borrowings at all. So it's not being a first time buyer. It's not having sold your property and being in rented. I mean, it is if you've got all cash to pay, but if you're still needing a mortgage, that still doesn't make you a cash buyer. You're still buying with a mortgage. But more importantly, I think downsizers think that they are first time, sorry, not first time buyers, cash buyers as well, because they're going to be buying with all cash once they've sold their house. They paid their mortgage off and downsized, but they're not cash buyers because it depends on the sale of their property first.
So would you say what puts me in a strong position is the timing? Is that important then? Because a cash buyer has the funds straight away, whereas someone who's got a mortgage or downsizing is the timing. So
It's timing. So being in a strong position is always best when you're looking at a house and you're about to put an offer on. You can get away with it if a house has been on the market a while and there's not a lot of interest, if you're not quite ready, because they might wait for you to be ready. But where you've got competition, it'll always be the stronger buyer that wins. And the strongest buyers will always be those buying with outright cash, of course, because it's quick and there's no chain. That will be followed by people buying just with a mortgage and a cash deposit. Again, no chain. And it would, of course, be cash buyer downsizers if they've sold already and they're in rented and ready to go. And of course, behind all of that would be somebody who's sold with a completed chain. They're also in a good position.
So from your perspective, understanding what their position is related to selling and what they're looking to for buying as well. So as a mortgage advisor, we also come across the clients who are in that position where they're looking to actually sell their property and then go on and buy somewhere else. So I would also be helping them work out the affordability for that, what we call an onward purchase. And we look to see what they can actually afford. So do you speak to mortgage advisors at that point as well, would you say?
I would. It depends who the client is and at what stage they come to us. I tend to find, in all honesty, that most people have sorted themselves. They've spoken to a mortgage advisor and they come. either with cash or with their mortgage arranged or whatever. But if they haven't, and I think there might be some issues with it, like people relocating from abroad. I spoke to one this morning actually. People getting a divorce or people who are making an onward move. I always get them to recheck it with a mortgage advisor just to make sure that they know exactly how much they can borrow. Because people do make assumptions how much they can borrow by a quick check online. Sometimes they need to do it properly.
That's
Yeah.
interesting you say about the online bit, because I was going to question it, because with the likes of all these, like, compare the meerkat or market, um, don't you find that, especially as Jane's been saying, they need to speak to someone? You can't just do this thing online. You need someone like you involved in the transaction.
I think it's becoming more and more important to have someone that you actually had that conversation with before, because it is so easy to put all the figures in a calculator and believe that you've done it correctly. However, there's so many things that might be missed. A classic one is childcare arrangements, or if you're on maternity leave, you might have missed out what the actual outcome is or how the lender will look at it as well. Sole traders are a big one. They believe that this is the scenario, but actually, when we look at the figures together, it's understanding what the lender will actually look at. And as a director, you have a choice. You can use your salary and the dividends you've declared, or you can use the profit from your limited company. So having a comparison between those two can make a massive difference in terms of your affordability and how much you can actually go on to buy. So those are very key important points to speak to someone first before you just go off on one of those calculators and believe you've got the right figure. Because you've got an interesting story about that, haven't you, Jane? About a client who the value of their home and also how much they could lend.
I don't know which one was that. The one I just talked about was the
Oh,
couple
the gentleman who didn't know how much his property was
Oh
worth.
yeah, that's true as well. We had another guy come round who was about to put his house on the market, convinced that it was going to sell really quickly, as everybody always is. But he actually came back to me really excited because he checked out his mortgage capability and discovered he could borrow lots more than he thought. And he'd done all his checks, he'd done it online, and he had an X amount of budget, and then he found out he actually had a lot more. Again, he owned his own company, he was a director, so I guess he spoke to a really good mortgage advisor who was able to look at all his options and go, actually, you can have this much. And he was really excited. And then when the estate agent came round to value his house and the estate agent said, how much do you think it's worth? He was like, oh, maybe 495. It was actually worth 600. So he was one of the rare cases that he was doubly excited that his house was worth more than he thought and he could borrow more than he thought. So when he came round to view my property, he was on cloud nine going, I can't believe I can own this.
We've had
Yeah.
conversations where you've had clients come to see you and you are very realistic in your pricing,
Mm.
because your job is to
Yeah.
sell the property
It's to
for the
sell the
client.
property. Yeah.
And it must be quite disconcerting when you get people coming in having gone to other agents who have said, oh, what do you think it's worth? They've told them, they go, well, we'll market it at that.
Yeah.
And
That
then you have
is.
to come in at 100 grand less.
Yeah. It's always the worst part of my job is getting people to be realistic about what their house is worth. But I think if you back it up with actual fact, you give comparables and you state your reasons strongly, it's very difficult for them to argue it another way. And using actual sold price data and actual figures from the market in the last couple of months is always the best way. Because people will always think, of course, we all do it. I would do it too. We all like to think our house is worth a certain amount of money. But it's not always the case. The market is quite tough at the minute, and I think to be the one that gets sold, you've got to be priced realistically. You've got to be the one where people go, "Oh, that looks good value for money. Let's go and look at it."
Makes perfect sense to me. Desi, you had some other queries that you wanted to put across, or not, maybe?
No, I think we mentioned that we were going to talk about downsizing and what your options are there if you do actually look to change your property and downsize. And linked to that is just that if that isn't an option or you're not considering that, you could look at equity release as well if you did want some funds. But generally, if we were chatting to a client around that area, we would find out whether downsizing was their best first option. Do you get many clients like that?
We have lots of downsizers, and actually, it's quite tricky because I think when people are used to living in houses of 2 million, 3 million, 1.5 million, and they're thinking about clearing their mortgage, downsizing to something more manageable, they get on board with that and it sounds great. And then they start looking at houses that they think is a downsize. And of course, all they see is, oh, it's small. Where are we going to put this? Where are we going to put that? So I think downsizing is a really big thing that people need to get their head fully around first. I would find it hard as well. And we will be doing it one day, probably in the not too distant future, to be fair. But you do have to get your head around that downsizing means exactly that. It means downsizing. There will be less space. There'll definitely be less land. And you'll have less space to keep things. So you've got to be in your mind just right, being able to get rid of stuff, declutter, and actually downsize your life. And it's surprising how many people think they're doing it and then they're not.
I would imagine it's like understanding what those outcomes are. Another area that I wanted to chat to you about that you like to do with your clients is the staging. We were just having a bit of a conversation about that for people who are looking to then sell and buy. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Or?
I think staging is very underrated in our country, in the UK. We don't do it as a matter of fact. And yet it makes such a difference, such a big impact onto how your house is photographed, how it appears online, how it appears to viewers when they come around. And we don't see it ourselves. We might think our house is perfect, but we're not seeing it as others see it. You need someone else to come in and tell you how it looks. And for most people, it's simply a case of decluttering, maybe getting rooms back to the purpose that that room has. Because I go and see a lot of people and they go, oh, don't mind the stuff, don't mind the stuff, it'll be gone when we move. And I'm like, it actually needs to be gone before we do the photos.
Yeah.
Because you want your house, it's the biggest asset that most people own. So when you sell it, you want it to be presented at its very best online and in the photos. And that means decluttering. It means arranging the furniture just so. It means getting it how someone else can see themselves living in it. And if your house is full of your clutter, someone else can't envisage themselves living there. They just see your stuff. So although it's huge in the States, I think if you lived in the States, you probably wouldn't put your house on the market without some sort of staging. In this country, it's not, but you can get various levels. It doesn't mean you're going to have to spend a fortune. I work with about 2 or 3 different people, all of whom are brilliant in their own ways. And for around £300, they can do you the basic service, which is they come in as a stranger, give you their initial thoughts about your house, draw you a plan about what your house should look like, what you should remove, what you shouldn't, how you could rearrange furniture, whether a wall needs a quick paint. And they leave you with that plan, and then you can implement that. And then it goes up in stages. They can do the plan and then they can implement, or in some cases, a full stage where they will literally pack most of your stuff up, put it away, and replace with furniture, artwork, mirrors, rugs, whatever.
I can imagine in your area that's quite essential to have a good understanding of what the property, what its potential actually is.
It makes such a big difference.
Yes.
One of the properties I've got right now was an older couple who are downsizing and they're 80, and it's a beautiful house that's been in their family since 1990. So 35, 36 years, big emotional tie for them to sell it. But it was full of their stuff and their memories. You couldn't get in some rooms. It was just the way they lived. And I just said, we really want to get this right first time. We're going to have a tidy up. But they were brilliant for their age. They worked with the stager, and we gave them, because they're quite old, about 3 or 4 months. And she gave them a plan, and they got through it like troopers.
Wow.
There was still a bit of stuff around when we came to do the photos, but it was fine. We acted as a team. We boxed things up. We got the rooms right. We shot it.
Another area that sets Jane's apart.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our podcast today. I want to thank you guys, Jane and Desi. It's been absolutely amazing. And I've done a number of these podcasts, and I am absolutely enamored of the fact that I said very little. So that is really good. I didn't need to gee anybody along. So thank you, ladies. It's been really good.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That was lovely. Thank you.